Yes, I'm sorry.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks in opposition to this bill because Americans need us to focus on jobs right now, not this extreme bill.
Debate from earlier today on health insurance coverage of abortions. The House is coming in now for more debate on that bill. Votes are scheduled for later this evening.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the proceedings had during the recess be printed in the record.
Without objection. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitt, seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 358 and to insert extraneous material on the bill.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I seek recognition.
The gentleman may proceed.
They have to read the bill. Yeah, I'd let them report the bill. They have to report the bill.
Does the gentleman wish to call up a bill?
That is correct, Madam Speaker. I move that we take up H.R. 358.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar number 133, H.R. 358, a bill to amend the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act to modify special rules relating to coverage of abortion services under such act.
Pursuant to House Resolution 430, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce printed in this bill is adopted, and the bill as amended is considered read. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Plone, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Madam Speaker, I am humbled. Madam Speaker, I am humbled to stand in this chamber and engage in debate over such a critical matter as this. Like the civil rights movement, the pro-life cause has always been one of securing rights for those who cannot speak for themselves and who cannot on their own obtain them. The fight goes all the way back to our nation's beginning. What more could our founding fathers have envisioned when they drafted the Declaration of Independence, proclaiming to all that America would, quote, hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, end quote. There it is. The first unalienable right designated by the Declaration of Independence is the right to life. Our founding fathers must have deemed this an indispensable right, for its placement signifies it was not an afterthought. From the start of our great nation until now, countless men and women have fought and even sacrificed their own lives to protect that right for others. Yet, in 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a decision that has changed the course of history in this country. A right that had been protected for nearly 200 years was tossed aside by a court decision to legalize abortion. Up until that point, an unwanted pregnancy was likely to lead to an adoption, a process that placed an unwanted child in a caring home. The legacy of the late Steve Jobs reminds us of the impact an adoption can have on the entire world. Fortunately for us, Jobs was born 18 years before Roe v. Wade. Shortly after his birth to a single mother, Jobs was adopted by a married couple in Central California. He would go on to be the founder of a tech company that has literally changed the world. His was the root of many unexpected children before 1973. Maya Angelou, Babe Ruth, and Eleanor Roosevelt are just a few of the many adoptees that have transformed the world we live in today. Unfortunately, since Roe v. Wade, more and more women are being persuaded that abortion is nothing more than a simple medical procedure that will help them move on with their lives. This could not be further from the truth. A study of Medi-Cal patients in California revealed that women who had had an abortion were 160% more likely to be admitted for psychiatric treatment than those who had carried the child to term and delivery. These women who chose to terminate their pregnancies then had to deal with the psychological devastation that is often associated with such a decision. Adding harm upon harm, abortion is a procedure that brings mental trauma to the mother and irreparable damage to the unborn. Because of this, the policy of the federal government for the last 35 years has been to ban funding for such a procedure. Studies have shown that when the government subsidizes abortion, their number increases. The President, a supporter of abortion rights, has stated his commitment to reducing the amount of abortions in this country. Restoring the policy of prohibiting federal funds for abortion would be a good first step. The American people, in large degree, agree with this policy. In fact, as recently as last year, a survey revealed that 67% of Americans support a ban on abortion funding. But the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act failed to include this prohibition, and that is why we are here today. President Obama indicated his support for upholding the ban on federal funding for abortion and health reform, and that is exactly what the Pro-Life Act, Protect Life Act does. The issue of prohibiting taxpayer funds for abortion is important to the American people, and so it should be important to Congress as well. Protecting the unalienable right to life is important to the American people. It should be to the Congress as well. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to H.R. 358, legislation that infringes upon a woman's right to choose. This bill is unnecessary, divisive, and extreme, and it saddens me that the Republican leadership has chosen to bring this bill to the House floor when Americans are struggling. The American people want us to work together to address their top priority, creating jobs. As such, we should be focusing on putting Americans back to work, not dividing Congress on ideological issues. And we certainly shouldn't be considering legislation that rolls back women's reproductive rights 38 years. Madam Speaker, supporters of this bill claim it is amending the Affordable Care Act to ensure U.S. tax dollars are not used to fund abortions. However, the Affordable Care Act already prohibits the use of federal dollars to fund abortions. Instead, H.R. 358 will eliminate access to abortion care for many women by banning insurance plans regulated by the Affordable Care Act from offering abortion-inclusive coverage if they take even one federally subsidized customer. So if a plan takes one subsidized customer, then they can't provide abortion coverage insurance to anyone else in the plan. What's even more concerning, Madam Speaker, is that this legislation could place many women who need reproductive health care in dangerous, potentially life-threatening situations by expanding a lopsided policy that allows health workers and hospitals the ability to refuse to provide and refer for abortion care and even deny emergency abortion care. So that's why I was so appalled, truly appalled yesterday by comments that were made at the Rules Committee, and I want to set the record straight. This bill is not simply the Stupak-Pitts amendment that was debated and supported during the health reform consideration. During the Rules Committee, I heard that over and over again from the Republican side. This is just the Stupak bill all over again. That is simply not true. H.R. 358 goes significantly beyond the Stupak Amendment. The Stupak Amendment limited its reach only to qualified health plans and had no effect on completely private plans. But H.R. 358 affects any health plan. The Stupak Amendment limited its reach only to federal funding and insurance coverage of abortion. H.R. 358 includes access to abortion services, a much broader term with far-reaching effects. And the Stupak Amendment limited its reach only to state conscience protection laws that deal with abortion. But H.R. 358 expands that protection to those covering health and medical services outside of abortion. The Stupak Amendment did not create any exception to the obligation of hospitals to comply with EMTALA. Instead, it left that obligation intact. So as my colleagues will see, no one should be fooled by the argument that this is simply Stupak, because it's simply not. I want to emphasize the effect of this amendment would mean that effectively women would not be able to get any kind of health insurance for abortion coverage, either because they wouldn't be able to get a comprehensive plan on the exchange, or because they would be forced to try to buy one outside the exchange just for abortion services, which isn't going to be available, Madam Speaker. So practically speaking, the Pitts Amendment does is make it impossible for a woman to exercise her right under the Constitution if she chooses to have an abortion, because she won't be able to get insurance coverage for it at all. Madam Speaker, H.R. 358 is a massive overreach of women's health. It extensively restricts women's access to reproductive health services and life-saving care. It's a step towards eliminating a choice that our Supreme Court has deemed legal and remains legal to this day. Now, if you want to overturn Roe v. Wade, and I know that there are members on the other side of the aisle who feel that way, then they can try to do that. But don't do it in a sneaky way by denying women insurance and effectively saying that they can't exercise what the Supreme Court says is their right under the Constitution. Women need and are entitled to safe, affordable health care options. And this bill only serves to create health and financial challenges that I think are going to be impossible to overcome. It's dangerous to women's health, and I urge my colleagues to vote nay on the legislation. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, at this time I yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. John Fleming.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and let me also thank you, Mr. Pitts, for your work on this bill and your lifelong career in protecting life. Madam Speaker, the bill before us today, H.R. 358, the Protect Life Act, would accomplish two important things. It would remove funding for abortion and abortion coverage under the Patient Protection and Affordability Act. And it would extend the conscience protections to pro-life doctors, nurses, hospitals, and other health care facilities who object to destroying the lives of unborn children. Madam Speaker, I've been a doctor for 36 years, a father of 4, grandfather of 2, and I can tell you that the taking of innocent life is not health care. It is not health care. Having said that, this country is still divided on whether or not a woman should have the right to take an unborn infant. However, the country is not divided on the issue for who should pay for it, and that issue is taxpayers. 2 to 1, Americans say taxpayers should not be footing the bill. And that's what this is about, as well as the Conscience Clause. This protection is critical for pro-life and religious health care. Could I have 30 more seconds?
Yield the gentleman 30 seconds.
Thank you. This protection is critical for pro-life and religious health care providers and entities. EMTALA, which is part of the discussion here, requires that health care providers, such as myself, must take care of women and must take care of their infants, unborn or otherwise. And so I say to you, Madam Speaker, today, this bill protects life, and it does not require taxpayers to foot the bill for those who choose to take innocent life. With that, I yield back my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to our distinguished Democratic whip, Mr. Hoyer.
The gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer, is recognized. Without objection.
I thank the gentleman from New Jersey for yielding, and I thank him for his leadership. I rise in opposition to this bill, the so-called Protect Life Act. First of all, over and over again, we repeat the premise that somehow we're using government funds through the Affordable Care Act for abortion. We are not. No matter how many times you say it, the fact is that we specifically precluded that from happening. What this bill does goes much further. It threatens to make harder for women across the country to receive health care that they need. I understand the doctor who just said that the termination of a pregnancy is not health care. I understand his premise. But I also understand that We in America have adopted the premise that if somebody comes to the hospital, a woman comes to the hospital, and has at great risk to her life a pregnancy which is causing her health to be at great risk and her life as well, what this bill does is says you don't have to intervene under those circumstances. I don't think that's protecting life, I say to my friend. In fact, I think it is ignoring the protection of life. Moreover, it does nothing to create jobs, which is what Congress should be focusing on during this time when so many Americans are out of work. Very frankly, you have criticized the President of the United States for submitting a jobs bill to this Congress that doesn't have a chance of passage. I've heard that over and over again. All of you know this has no chance of passage. It may pass this House. I hope not. I urge its defeat. But it won't pass. It won't become law. And so while millions of Americans' quality of life is put at risk because of the lack of jobs and opportunity that they have, we consider what I believe is simply legislation to speak to a particular interest group in our parties. I understand that. Republicans come to this floor and speak all the time about keeping government out of people's lives. But this bill does exactly the opposite. What it says is that women won't be able to spend their own money on comprehensive reform for reproductive coverage under a new health exchange. Now, you don't want us to tell people they have to have insurance, but you want to tell them what they can't have in insurance with their own money. I'm not sure I get the distinction there. Maybe you can come up with a distinction, but it certainly is a very nuanced one if it exists at all. Even more unbelievably, do you have an additional minute?
Additional minute to the gentleman.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Even more unbelievable, the bill will allow a hospital to refuse women emergency care of this kind, even when necessary to save their lives. I don't think that's what you intend. I certainly hope it's not. But it is the interpretation that many of us have put on the language of your bill. So, ladies and gentlemen of this House, this issue has been debated over and over again. We adopted a Hyde Amendment. The premise of the Hyde Amendment was that we shouldn't take taxpayers' money and spend it on abortion. Very frankly, I represent 60,000 federal employees. We precluded them from using the salary that they receive to buy insurance that has abortion coverage. It's their money. I hear that all the time. It's their money. But you don't allow them to use their money for that purpose. Now you are saying to the private sector women, you can't use your money. You can't have it both ways. Either it's their money for services they constitutionally can receive, or it's not. Defeat this bill. This is a difficult issue. Let women, doctors, and their faith deal with it. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, before I yield the next speaker, I have a copy here of the Pawtucket law. On page 65, I'll just read one title of a paragraph: Abortions for which public funding is allowed. This time I yield to the gentleman from Louisiana, Steve Scalise, for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for, did you say a minute? The gentleman from Pennsylvania, did you yield a minute? 1 minute?
1 minute.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for yielding, and especially for his leadership in bringing the Protect Life Act to the floor of the House of Representatives. You know, when we look at a time right now when our country is going broke, it's offensive to most Americans that taxpayer money can still be used to subsidize abortion in this country. And we had this debate during the President's health care law. We tried to put real language that would protect that from happening, and unfortunately we weren't able to get that protection. And for those of us that want to repeal the President's health care law completely, we've already passed that bill and sent it to the Senate, and they've taken no action. But we're here today to address specifically this problem and say there should be no taxpayer money that is allowed to be used to subsidize abortion. And if you look in the bill, there are employers out there who are providing good health care to their employees today. And yet, under the law that the President passed and signed into law, that there's federal officials could tell those private employers that they have to provide abortion services in their policy. And so they'll just drop the policy. This prevents that from happening as well. It gives conscience protections so that if there's a medical professional that doesn't want to participate in abortion, they don't have to. These are all common sense proposals that should pass and have bipartisan support, and they should also pass the Senate. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 3 minutes to our ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Waxman.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
Madam Chair and members of the Congress of the United States, this bill is an absolute disgrace. With all the problems we have in this country, an economic crisis, poverty levels at the highest we've seen in a generation, urgent needs for our schools, Americans still too dependent on foreign oil and imported energy. What does the Republican leadership bring up for us to debate? Yet another bill to limit women's access to reproductive health services. Now, I say another bill because the House has already adopted H.R. 3, and that bill codified in the law that no federal dollars would be used to pay for abortion services, whether it's under Medicaid, the traditional Hyde Amendment, or the D.C. appropriations, or for federal employees, or women who serve in the military, or those who get subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. What this bill seeks to do, pure and simple, is to destroy one of the most hard-fought but delicately balanced sections of the Affordable Care Act, and that was on abortion. This section came about as a result of a lot of hard work by many members in the House and the Senate, particularly Senator Nelson, whose pro-life record speaks for itself clearly and unequivocally. The law prohibits the use of federal funds for abortion. It keeps state and federal abortion-related laws in place. It ensures that those whose conscience dictates against abortion are protected and not discriminated against. And it went further. The language in the Affordable Care Act said you cannot use any subsidies to pay for your abortion insurance coverage. You had to use only private personal dollars. Well, this bill would restrict insurance plans' flexibility regarding abortion coverage, and I think it will result in a virtual shutdown of private coverage for this service for everyone. This legislation also takes away the Affordable Care Act's limited anti-discrimination protection for those providers whose conscience dictates that women should have access to abortion. It's a legal and, in many cases, an appropriate medical service. Among the most disturbing features of this bill, this Pitts bill, it would say that health care providers would remain obligated to provide emergency service and would no longer be required to provide emergency services as required under the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, commonly known as EMTALA. In other words, someone brought in an emergency service who may die, a woman who may die. I ask for an additional minute.
Yield the gentleman an additional minute.
The gentleman's recognized.
A woman who may die from her pregnancy and she's in for emergency services, the doctor can refuse to give her emergency services if his conscience would prohibit performing an abortion. Well, take it as a whole, this bill is a full-throttled assault on women's health and a woman's right to choose. It's not what the American people voted for last November. We should be focusing our attention on jobs, economic growth, and the numerous pressing important challenges we face as a nation. This is a shameless, just a shameless bill. I urge a no vote on H.R. 358. I yield back the rest of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I yield to the distinguished Vice Chairman of the Health Subcommittee, Dr. Burgess, for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the Chairman. I won't take the full minute. I just simply wanted to respond to what we just heard here on the floor of the House. H.R. 358 does not change current law or any standard related to Section 1867 of the Social Security Act, commonly referred to as EMTALA. The section states that a hospital must provide treatment or stabilization of a medical condition. Paragraph E of Section 1867 defines an emergency medical condition as a medical condition of sufficient severity such that the absence of immediate medical attention could be reasonably expected to place the life and health of the pregnant woman or her unborn child in serious jeopardy. EMTALA currently recognizes both lives. Therefore, the Protect Life Act provides conscience protections consistent with the emergency treatment requirements of current law under EMTALA. I yield back.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from New Jersey.
I yield 2 minutes to a member of the Health Subcommittee, Mr. Engel of New York.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I rise today in strong opposition, and I must say honest bafflement to this so-called Protect Life Act. I'm baffled because it truly stretches the limits of the rational mind to imagine why the Republican majority, a group of people who supposedly say they make it their mission to limit government involvement in every way possible, why they continue to insert themselves and the government into the personal health care decisions of Americans across the country. What's even more baffling is that for 30 years, federal law has prohibited federal funding of abortions. It's one thing to say the government won't pay for abortions, but quite another, as we're doing here, to say that women can't use their own dollars to pay for abortion coverage. Here we are with this absurd song and dance that has no basis in reality, and is entirely about scoring political points with the Republican base once again, while, as my colleagues have said, doing nothing to help employment and create jobs in this country. If this bill stopped at being absurd, it would be one thing. But more than absurd, this cruel legislation would actually allow hospitals to refuse to provide a woman abortion care, even if she would die without it. Now, my colleagues who claim they want smaller government and say they want to get the government out of people's lives, this is a hell of a way to do it, or to prove it. I urge my colleagues to fight for common sense, to protect women from this harsh attack, and to vote no on H.R. 358. The gentleman before was talking about public funding being used for abortions. What is that? Using taxpayers' money for incest, or to save the life of the woman, or to rape? Would we deny women the right to have an abortion if they were raped, or if it would save their lives? I think not. I think the American people can see through this one. This is nothing more than playing to the base. Bad policy for this country. Let's get the government out of people's lives. Vote no on this bill.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, I yield to another distinguished member of the Health Subcommittee, the gentleman from Georgia, Dr. Phil Gingrey, for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for yielding. I commend him for his great work on this bill. As a practicing OBGYN for nearly 30 years, I believe that all life is sacred. Having delivered more than 5,000 babies into this world, I have a deep appreciation for how wonderful life is. The issue of abortion is a very personal matter for me, as it is for many in this country and on both sides of the aisle of this issue. However, the decades-old debate on the issue of abortion in this country, that's not why we're on the floor today. We're here today to answer one question. Should taxpayer dollars be used to fund abortions? And when an elective procedure, a choice, can decide between life and death, I would suggest that it is an important question to answer. The Protect Life Act is a piece of legislation that seeks to answer that question and set right what the Congress got wrong. Speaking as a grandfather, a father, a son, and an OBGYN physician, I will be voting to ensure that our government does not put taxpayer dollars behind any person who seeks an elective abortion. And I yield back.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, can I ask how much time remains on both sides of the aisle?
The gentleman from New Jersey has 16 minutes.
16.
The gentleman from New Jersey, Pennsylvania has 20 3/4.
I think we should reserve since you have a lot more time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, at this time I yield 1 minute. The gentlelady from Missouri, Ms. Hartzler.
The gentlelady from Missouri is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, my dear colleague here. Today I rise in support of the Protect Life Act, which will ensure that taxpayer dollars are not used to pay for abortions through last year's health care bill. It is right and proper that we should do so. Every life deserves to be born and is worthy of life. Every life has a purpose and a plan. King David reminds us of the value of life in our Creator's eyes when he penned the following: "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in a secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days were written for me in the book before one of them came to be." I'm thankful that our Declaration of Independence recognizes that we are endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, including the right to life. Our Founding Fathers laid out the principle of life, and today we have an opportunity to affirm and carry on that mantle by passing the Protect Life Act. I yield back my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. CICILLINE.
The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I rise in strong opposition to this dangerous legislation, the so-called Protect Life Act, which will in fact endanger the lives of women. With only 23 legislative days remaining in this session before the end of the year, I am stunned by the decision to waste precious time debating this bill. This unprecedented attack on women's health and the right of women to access reproductive health care. We should instead be spending this time debating ways to grow our economy, ways to help small businesses create jobs, and ways to rebuild our roads and schools so that we can put people back to work and improve our competitiveness in the global marketplace. But instead of talking about how we create jobs, we're debating the merits of a bill intended to continue the war on women being waged by my Republican colleagues. This bill would effectively limit for the first time how women can spend their own private dollars to purchase health insurance. This is outrageous. I am certain members of this body would never dare to enact legislation limiting the ability of men to access health care. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill, to end the attack on women's rights and women's health, and to focus instead on job creation. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Black.
The gentlelady from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for yielding. For over 30 years, the Hyde Amendment, in conjunction with a patchwork of other policies, has regulated the federal funding of abortions under programs such as Medicaid. And together, these various policies ensure that an American taxpayer is not involved in funding the destruction of innocent human life. And despite the assurances from President Obama, the Patient Protection and Affordability Care Act will allow federal funds to subsidize abortions for the first time since 1976 through state high-risk pools and community health centers. While the President's executive order was an attempt to reassure Congress after the Stupak Amendment did not make it into the bill's final version, the fact of the matter is that the executive order is not law, and it can change all too easily. This bill would prohibit funding for abortions and abortion coverage under the Patient Protection and Affordability Act. This legislation also protects the conscience rights for health care workers such as myself by providing that federal agencies and state and local governments funding by PACA may not discriminate against health care entities that refuse to be involved in abortion. Madam Chair, may I ask for just about 15 more seconds?
I 15 seconds, gentlelady.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, this bill is not about a mother's right to choose, as the President and the congressional Democrats would lead us to believe. Rather, this is about ensuring that the proper restrictions are in place in order to ensure that taxpayer funds are not used to fund abortion or abortion coverage under the Patient Protection and Affordability Care Act. I yield back my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Thompson.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to this bill. You know, a new poll today suggests that the 999 campaign theme of the new Republican presidential frontrunner is starting to gain traction. And it appears that the majority has taken a page from the Kaine playbook with their 10-10-10 program. Because this is the 10th month without a jobs bill on the floor. The 10th time we've put polarizing social issues and attacks on women's health before job creation and economic security. And the 10th attempt at repealing parts or all of the Affordable Care Act. This bill creates no jobs, it doesn't help the economy, and it inserts the government smack in the middle of people's health care decisions. I urge a no vote on this bill and urge the majority to get to work helping the economy and creating jobs. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, I am pleased to yield to another leader on the life issue, gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Iowa is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for his leadership on this issue, and I'm privileged to be on the floor with a lot of pro-life activists. I rise in support of the Protect Life Act, and I think we should talk about what is really going on behind those dollars that would go into abortion clinics. And it's been called cruel legislation. Think about how cruel it is to take a pair of forceps and pull a baby apart piece by piece in dilation and extraction, or D&E. 14 to 24 weeks, a fully formed, perfectly formed and perfectly innocent baby pulled apart piece by piece, put into a pan and added up to see if all the pieces are there. It is ghastly, it's gruesome, it's ghoulish, and it's grotesque. And we should never compel taxpayers to pay for something that we couldn't bear the sight of, and you'll never see a video of it for that reason. It is a process that degrades our entire culture. And to argue that women can't spend their own dollars to get an abortion just simply isn't true. There's a side piece in this that still prevails, and there's always that cash right up to Planned Parenthood. So, Madam Speaker, I urge support for the Protect Life Act, and I congratulate the people that have stood for innocent unborn human life so many times on the floor of the House of Representatives, and I yield back. The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I yield one minute to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Velasquez.
The gentlelady from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank the gentleman for yielding. At a time when the American people are crying out for action on jobs, we are debating legislation that will instead trample on a woman's fundamental reproductive rights. The fact of the matter is that the Affordable Care prohibits any taxpayer's dollar from paying for abortions. That's the law of the land. The legislation before the House goes far beyond that, restricting for the first time how women with private insurance can spend their own private dollars in purchasing insurance. For women, this bill constitutes nothing less than a full-fledged assault on their right to choose. Madam Speaker, with 8 million people unemployed in this country, with wages going down, poverty is on the rise, and this is all what the Republicans have to offer. This is why people are literally in the streets demanding solutions to the job crisis, seeking greater opportunity and an end to economic inequality. The American people do not want ideological posturing. They want real solutions that create real jobs. Vote down this legislation.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased at this time to yield 1 minute to another eloquent voice for the unborn, the chair of the Pro-Life Women's Caucus, Ms. Schmidt from Ohio. 1 minute.
The gentlelady from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm actually one of the folks that read the bill before we passed it, and there are passages in the bill that do allow for federal funding of abortion. And what this bill does is it seeks to correct that language. You know, the Hyde Amendment clearly states that no federal tax dollars can be used for abortion, and at the time that the Hyde Amendment was created, we really only had Medicaid to worry about. But with the vast changes in our lifestyles, other avenues have come forward for federal funding of abortion to occur if we are not careful in the way we construct laws in this awesome body. Time and time again, the American public has said, we're conflicted on the issue of abortion, but we're not conflicted about not using federal funds to pay for it. Just in April of this year, 61% of respondents on a CNN poll said no federal funding of abortion. What this bill does is what we should have done in March of 2010, not allow any federal funds to be used to pay for abortion anytime, any place in this health care bill. I urge my colleagues to pass this and correct the language that should have been done a year ago.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I'd ask my colleague, I would like to reserve because I think there's significantly more time on your side.
So the gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, at this time, I yield to another outstanding voice for the unborn, the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Pence, for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Speaker, I rise in support of the Protect Life Act with a grateful heart to Chairman Joe Pitts and Congressman Dan Lipinski for their bipartisan leadership in bringing this legislation to the floor. I believe that ending an innocent human life is morally wrong, but I also believe that it's morally wrong to take the taxpayer dollars of millions of pro-life Americans to subsidize abortion or abortion coverage in this country. As it stands today, Obamacare requires millions of pro-life taxpayers to pay for abortions and subsidize health care plans that cover abortions. This legislation will correct that profound flaw in this legislation. Now, I know President Obama issued an executive order during the heat of the legislative battle over Obamacare, but we all know executive orders do not carry the force of law, can be overturned by the courts, and are superseded by statutes. Obamacare should be repealed. But in the meantime, let's take this moment to say yes to life, to say yes to respecting the values of tens of millions of Americans, and make right that which was wrong in Obamacare itself. Let's pass the Protect Life Act, and let's protect taxpayers of pro-life values all across this country, and do it now.
Reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Wisconsin, who's also a member of the Health Subcommittee, Ms. Baldwin.
The gentlelady from Wisconsin is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Notably absent from the Republican agenda this year are the issues that the American people really care about: creating jobs and growing our economy. Just when we should be pulling together to work on these issues, instead Republicans have put forth divisive and extreme legislation that takes away women's ability to make their own important life decisions about their reproductive health. This extremist legislation is an unprecedented display of lack of respect for American women and our safety. The effect of this bill would be to cut off millions of women from the private care they already have and limit the ability of a woman to get the care she needs, even if the result is a serious, permanent health condition that could shorten her life. So we now know the Republicans' real agenda: to roll back women's health and rights. They have shown their true colors by trying to weaken rape and incest exceptions for abortions. It's hard to believe, but a majority of the Republican House members co-sponsored legislation to give insurance companies new authority to decide if a woman had been raped and to deny care to incest victims. Thanks to the American women who spoke out, this dangerous provision was dropped. But I think it raises an important question.
If Republicans are willing to redefine what constitutes rape and incest, what are they going to try next? Enough is enough. It is time for the Republican majority to respect women's important life decisions, and it is time that they start to stand and start to refocus on the priorities of this country right now, jobs and growing the economy. I urge my colleagues to oppose this extreme and intrusive legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, before I yield to the next gentleman in response to the gentlelady, the House has passed 12 different jobs bills already. I believe the ladies voted against every one. They're sitting in the Senate waiting for action. I would like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Arizona, another leader in the pro-life movement, Mr. Franks, for 1 minute.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 1 minute.
I certainly thank the gentleman. Madam Speaker, when Obamacare was being unceremoniously rammed through this Congress against the will of the American people, Democrats tried to assure everyone that it was all about compassion. But, Madam Speaker, nothing so completely destroys the notion that Obamacare was ever about compassion more than the tragic determination on the part of the Democrat leadership to include the killing of little children by abortion in its provisions. And, Madam Speaker, as we face a debt that grows by $4 billion under the strain of Mr. Obama's record-setting spending every day, maybe we should all ask ourselves a question, and that is setting aside millions of taxpayer dollars to pay for the killing of innocent unborn children really one of our financial priorities? And if it is, we should ask another question, and that is, what in God's name has become of all of us?
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, can I ask about the time again?
The gentleman from New Jersey has 11 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Pennsylvania has 14 1/4 minutes.
If I could reserve once again.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, at this time I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Austria.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for his hard work on this bill. And as a member of the Congressional Pro-Life Caucus and original co-sponsor of this bill, I strongly support the Protect Life Act. You know, we heard during the health care reform debate that tax dollars would not be used to fund abortions. However, this important language was stripped from the final bill and replaced with accounting gimmicks and an executive order that can be reversed any time by this president or future administrations. This opens the door for federally funded abortions in the future and goes against the majority of Americans who believe that the government should not be in the business of paying for abortions. Congress must act now to protect the lives of our unborn children and to fully ensure that no tax dollars from Obamacare are used to fund abortions. The Protect Life Act also ensures that medical providers and workers are not discriminated against for refusing to perform abortions. These protections are crucial to the healthcare providers around the nation whose core values include a deeply held belief that we must protect all human life. And I urge my colleagues to vote for the Protect Life Act. And I yield back to balance my time. Thank you, Madam
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Sutton.
The gentlelady from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, the Republican majority is at it again. With no real jobs plan, we've seen this majority attempt to thrust on the American people bills that strip them of their rights instead of putting them back to work. Make no mistake, those proposing this extreme bill will not pass the Senate, and it will not be signed into law by the President. This bill at its core is an attack on women, especially poor women. Its extreme provisions will jeopardize a woman's access to life-saving care. It is outrageous that this Republican majority continues to focus on protecting subsidies for big oil and tax cuts for billionaires and targeting women and their access to health care, instead of working to help create jobs and empower women to improve their lives. The Republican majority is instead trying to pass this bill to allow hospitals to refuse to provide critical life-saving care. That means for women in rural areas that may only have access to one hospital could be left to die. This isn't the time to be putting America's women at risk. This is a time to be putting them and all Americans back to work. I encourage my colleagues to vote no on this extreme bill.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, at this time I yield to the distinguished gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Flake, 1 minute.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise in support of H.R. 358, the Protect Life Act, of which I'm a co-sponsor. It's been the practice of this House for decades to ensure that federal funds are not used for abortion except in rare cases of rape, incest, or to save the life of a mother. This is typically done by attaching language to appropriation bills that go through this House. Unfortunately, we don't always have regular order. Appropriation bills this year, we're likely to see a minibus or an omnibus or a vehicle that might not lend itself to the attachment of this language. So I think it is prudent what the House is doing today to ensure that this language goes into legislation to make sure that federal funds are not used for abortion services and to carry on the will of this body. And for that, I urge support of the bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Capps, who's a member of the Health Subcommittee.
The gentlelady from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, I rise in opposition to this misguided legislation. While the House leadership claims that this week's agenda is all about jobs, the discussion of this bill on the House floor shows their true colors, just like when they almost shut down the government over Planned Parenthood. Today, we once again witness how ideological campaign promises trump needed actions on jobs and the economy. It's been said before, and I'll say it again. H.R. 358 does not create a single job, not one. Instead, it's unprecedented assault on the rights of women and families everywhere to make important life decisions. This bill does a lot. It limits the choices of women and families to purchase health insurance with their own dollars. It removes vital protections to ensure that a pregnant woman with a life-threatening condition can get life-saving care, and circumvents state laws that ensure women have access to preventive services, screenings, and birth control. But what this bill doesn't do is trust our nation's women and families to make their own health care choices. This is unacceptable. Some have claimed that the Affordable Care Act has led to taxpayer-funded abortions. It is false. Others have claimed that this bill is nothing but the Stupak language that divided our chamber last year. I was involved in every debate over the Stupak amendment in the House, and Madam Chair, I can tell you, this is way beyond that misguided amendment. So I urge my colleagues to abandon this divisive effort, put the brakes on this extreme legislation, and let us turn our focus to the issue of job creation to help the American people. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, just to correct the gentlelady, there were 3 Stupak-Pitts amendments. 2 were adopted in committee and 1 on the floor, which got the most publicity. With the Senate, they were all taken out. We're going back to the original Stupak-Pitts amendments. I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Heisinger.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, and I appreciate the leadership of my friend from Pennsylvania, who has been a stalwart on this issue. And really what we're seeing, folks, is sleight of hand. They want to talk about jobs and they want to talk about big oil because they don't want to talk about the preciousness of life and how this procedure takes the life of an innocent. It's been labeled an extreme bill when actually this is a reasonable step that codifies what this president says is his own position. You know, I have a brother-in-law who's a doctor down in Cincinnati, and a little earlier today I called him to talk to him about what he went through in his training and what he had to deal with this particular issue. And when I described to him what we were trying to do about allowing him and any other med student and any other person that's going through that to conscientiously object from putting forward a procedure that they don't agree with, he said, of course, that makes sense. When I started talking to him about some of the rhetoric and some of the demagoguery that's surrounding this, he sarcastically said, boy, that doesn't sound political, does it? And that's exactly what it is. The American people that are watching this right now, they need to understand this is about life and protecting that life and making sure that our health care providers have the ability to say no to a procedure that they don't want to do. Thank you, Madam.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I would yield now 30 seconds to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Sheila Jackson-Lee.
The gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, let me be very clear. The only no that is being said is no to the vulnerable women that are traveling in an emergency ambulance to the hospital, desiring emergency treatment, dying, and not being able to be treated, needing to correct a problem that has in fact damaged their health and not being able to be treated. Not only is this bill unconstitutional, but the Affordable Care Act does not promote abortion, and frankly, federal funds are not being utilized for abortion. It will complicate the insurance process for all women in America. All you can hear is a siren going around and around and around. That woman laying on a gurney, that hospital being able to say no, and yes, the only no is that she will not live because this bill is passed. I ask my colleagues to vote against this bill. Vote for life. Vote against this bill.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, at this time I yield 1 minute for another outstanding voice for the unborn, one of our freshmen from Oklahoma, Mr. Langford.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 1 minute. Without objection.
We're a nation that values all life. When a bridge is under construction and a migratory bird nest with eggs is discovered, the Fish and Wildlife Migratory Bird Treaty Act forces the delay of construction until the birds have hatched and flown away. Why? Because life's important to us. When a baby is born premature, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to save that child because each life is important to us. We have one glaring and obvious exception to this passion for life: abortion. For some reason, we see the life of a duck in its egg as more valuable than an infant in the womb. For some reason, we think that a baby born 5 weeks early is worthy of hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical technology to save, but if that same mother wanted to hire a doctor to reach into the womb and kill that child with scissors 5 weeks before delivery, some would demand her choice must be protected. What our founding fathers considered self-evident truth, that we've been endowed by our Creator with certain rights beginning with life, is now a topic open for discussion in our modern-day ethic. I still believe in the value of the instructions given to leaders thousands of years ago in Proverbs 31. Speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak and judge fairly.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Madam Speaker, I believe there's still more time on the other side, so I would reserve at this time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Madam Speaker, at this time I yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Texas, Mr. Nagelbauer.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman, and I thank him for his tireless work for the unborn. I think it's a little interesting. I came down here tonight to talk about life, and my colleagues across the aisle are talking about jobs bill that their president introduced, which unfortunately, is the last time I checked, 0 members of the Democrats had co-signed that bill. But really the reason I'm want to talk about tonight, Madam Speaker, is the right for the unborn. And we were told that when we did this health care bill, don't worry about it, we'll do the executive order because we're going to take the Stupak-Pitts amendment out. But the truth of the matter, if we were going to do the Stupak-Pitts amendment, to do the executive order, why did we go ahead and pass the Stupak-Pitts amendment? But the reason is because we know that inside that bill, in several paragraphs, in several areas, is the ability for taxpayers' money to be used for abortions. In fact, according to Douglas Johnson, the federal legislative director of the National Right to Life Committee, Obamacare contains multiple provisions that provide authorizations for subsidies for abortions, both implicit and explicit, also for multiple positions to be used on the basis of expanding abortion. Let's vote for life.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Schakowsky.
The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. We're running out of legislative days before the end of the year, and instead of focusing on jobs or the economy, the House leadership has decided once again to consider legislation that endangers and attacks the rights of women. H.R. 358 is extreme legislation that puts the lives of women in danger. This legislation undermines the guarantee of emergency care under the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, EMTALA. H.R. 358 strips EMTALA of its power to ensure that women receive abortion care in emergency situations at hospitals by making their right to health care secondary to the hospital's ability to refuse to provide abortion care. Abortion care is necessary in some circumstances to save a woman's life. During the hearing on H.R. 358 in the Energy and Commerce Committee, some witnesses wrongly claimed that this was not the case. In response to those claims, Dr. Cassie Hammond, director of Northwestern University's Center for Family Planning and Contraception, wrote a letter based on his 20 years of experience in obstetric and complex abortion care to the committee to set the record straight. In his letter, Dr. Hammond states, quote, most patients are healthy women having healthy babies, but I am frequently asked to provide abortions for women confronting severely troubled pregnancies or their own life-endangering health issues. Physicians who provide health care to women cannot choose to ignore the more tragic consequences of human pregnancy, and neither should Congress, unquote. This legislation is an extreme and mean-spirited way to roll back women's health and rights. It is too extreme for women, too extreme for America, and we must reject it. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.